the analogy I have is if someone walks into your office with a paper bag full of cash and they say they're a foreign investor from another country, I wouldn't touch it. I would take them down to Chase or US Bank or something and say, here, this person wants to open an account. And then the bank knows what to do. The bank knows, well, we need an entity. You need a tax ID number. We need to look at the prohibited nation list. We need to look at the prohibited person list. And they can go through all that because they have staff and they understand that to see if that person can actually invest here, where you wouldn't have the capability of doing that. And then once they have the bank accepts the money and it's in ABC LLC, then ABC LLC can invest with you and you're on your way.
The Real Estate Vibe Show, and I'm your host, Vinki Loomba, a real estate investor. Today, I have a very special guest with me, Gene Trowbridge. Welcome, Gene.
Well, thank you, Vinki. I'm happy to be here. It's a pleasure.
Thanks. Pleasure is all mine. Gene has been in the commercial and investment real estate business continuously since 1972 and is in legal profession since 1996. Gene has a CCIM designation since 1977, and he's a member of California Bar. Gene is a former syndicator and has raised investor capital for 10 years. He served as a sponsor of 16 investment groups by raising equity from investors through registered representatives in broker-dealer community. And once he sent out 1,676 K1s in a single year. Wow, that's quite a number. We'll talk about that. He has trained and mentored 3 different law partners in syndication and crowdfunding. He authored his first book, A Whole New Business, in 2005. And the 4th edition and audible of his book is available and out this year in January. Today, we'll talk about syndication and crowdfunding with Gene. So welcome again, Gene. Let's start with your background. Would you please briefly share your background and tell us how did you become who you are today?
All right, I will do that. Really, my career has 2 parts. The first part, coming out of college, I went into the business of being a commercial real estate broker. And along the way, I bought a couple of rental houses, which I thought was a lot of work. So I thought I'd buy a multifamily property. But as most syndicators do, I didn't have enough money to buy it myself. So I got 3 fellows that I went to college with. We pitched in the money and we bought it and I managed it. And that was really the start of my syndication career. In 1979, I moved to California and decided I would be a full-time syndicator. And you know what we did, I played with a lot of different product types, multifamily, even mobile home park, but eventually I settled in on building storage facilities. So we built 32 self-storage facilities in the Southern California area. And that was where all my investors came from and all those darn K1s that you talk about. And because of the number of investors we had and the amount of work it took back in those days to do all that stuff, I decided that I'd grown as big as I was going to get in that industry and went home and sat with my wife, where all the great decisions are made at the kitchen table. And we had talked about this for years. And I said, it's time. I'm going to go to law school. And Kay was working, the kids were in school, and I headed off to law school. And then in 96, I became a member of the bar. I was, 46 years old, 48 years old. Wow. And now I'm quite a bit older. And so I've been doing it all that all that time. And it was a great match for me, Vinki, because I had all the practical experience you'd want of being a syndicator. And I'd worked with a number of different attorneys and law firms on the documents. And so I had good documents, I had good experience, and I just went off on my own and started to help people who wanted to get into business. I really started based on being a mentor to people who I knew who wanted to do this, but they just didn't know how to get started. And that's how my business started.
Wow. Quite an experience that you have created for yourself throughout your journey. And then you mentioned that you went to law school when you were in 40s. And now you say you are much older, but I would say age is just a number.
Okay, thank you.
Mind is a supercomputer. And if you keep your mind going, you never grow old. You just get more experienced. That's what I have to say.
I'll count on that advice from you. Okay, so that's great.
Thanks. So I'm going to ask you this. You mentioned a couple terms, syndication and syndicator. So I'm going to ask you how exactly real estate syndication works.
Okay, well, the term syndication means two or more people or entities getting together to do some business activity. So I get what I call homework calls. People call me and say, "Hey, Gene, I want to put together 5 or 10 family and friends to buy a building, but I don't want it to be a syndication." Well, it is a syndication. And if you're going to put it together, then there are a lot of words for it, but I call you a syndicator, the person who does that. The real question that they should be asking, and we get to it in the homework call, is your syndication going to be a security? That's where the rules come in, and that's where a securities attorney like me is necessary and gets hired to write the documents for you. So not too many people go to jail, to tell you the truth, but a lot of people say, "Hey, I can keep you out of jail." Well, I never kind of use that language, but there's a point to that. Okay, we just want to do it right. Okay, so that's it, and it's just a lot of people putting in a little bit amount of money, which adds up to a lot of money, and they go out and buy a property. And you have the investors, and you have the manager. In the LLC world, they're called members of the LLC, and then it's a manager of the LLC, and they go forward and run the project. It's big business. The SEC reported on the last report that came out last March. They come out every March. That the private placement business, the business we're in, raised $2.2 trillion in that 12-month period of time. So that's a lot of money. That's more money than is raised on Wall Street in initial public offerings in that same period of time. And so this is a huge business. Most of the money, honestly, is raised by licensed securities brokers who have huge databases of investors that they've developed relationships with. And that's where most of the money comes from. But in our little world, people doing real estate securities the way we do it, we do pretty well. I think since 2014, our clients have raised a little over $6 billion in syndication. And that's a lot of money and buys a lot of real estate.
That's true. So 2 things I'm going to ask you here. You mentioned the term security and then also syndicator. Who is the syndicator in this scenario? The operator is the syndicator or the deal sponsor?
The deal sponsor would be the syndicator. When you say the operator, you could have a property manager running the properties. In fact, most of the deals we do, the property is a long way from where the syndicator is. So the syndicator brings the investors together, finds the property, hires property management, and makes it happen. The issue of what is a security goes right to your question. A security is when people invest money in a common enterprise, not an entity, but some enterprise are doing it all together, like a movie or a television show or something like that. Piece of real estate, investment of money in a common enterprise where they expect a profit, but someone else is going to make it happen. The sponsor, the promoter, the syndicator is going to make it happen. Without the profit motive, we have things like GoFundMe. Hey, I haven't been on a great vacation in a long time. Send me some money. And if all of you send me enough money, I'll go on vacation. Well, that's crowdfunding. That really is the history of crowdfunding, but there's no profit motive. So it was never a security. Mm-hmm. But when the Jobs Act came along, they said, well, what if, you put something online and you raise some money and the most popular thing at that time was people developing their own beer, their own IPA, and you'd get your recipe done and you'd make it and people liked it, but you didn't have a space to make a lot of it or all the equipment you needed. So you'd go out, you'd crowdfund, started out with $1 million. That was the maximum you could crowdfund, and you could advertise and raise money from anyone, and go out and do your brewery business, which is still the number one way that crowdfunding, as far as its security goes in the country today. And then in a couple of years ago, they raised that limit to $5 million. So I bring that up because the word crowdfunding actually means something specific in the statute. There's a statute that's called regulation crowdfunding, and it deals with raising up to $5 million in a certain way at a certain time. However, I've fallen in the habit of using the word crowdfunding when I'm talking about a 506B or a 506C offering, because people understand the word crowdfunding. So, I mean, the title of our talk here is Syndication and Crowdfunding. In my book, it's Syndication and Crowdfunding. I don't talk much about regulation crowdfunding, but I sure use the term. And people, I think, understand that. So right now, using regulation crowdfunding, the $5 million limit is difficult to do with a real estate project because the portals, the broker-dealer portals that you have to use to raise money, they don't like real estate. The holding period is too long, it's illiquid, so it's quite difficult. We do some crowdfunding. Once again, we do it for liquor, for beer, for sake, businesses like that, but there's no one who will do it for us for real estate. So that's enough for crowdfunding.
So since we're talking about crowdfunding, I would like you to shed some light on it, or more light on it. You were saying that initially crowdfunding was for not profit. It was just like kind of GoFundMe for a vacation or some, or people needed, like somebody needed a kidney or some, some kind of experience they're having in their life, and they just say, GoFundMe, they are raising money for that. Mm-hmm. But now the definition of crowdfunding has changed because the real estate has involved in this. And it's more like a security now.
Well,
people are doing it for profit. So, right. Yeah. So what is your take on that?
Well, that's fine. That's why they put a regulation, because until the Jobs Act came and they put regulation crowdfunding in the rules, it wasn't a security. If you did it and you agreed to share the profits with your people, you're violating the law. Mm-hmm. So they said, well, let's put it in the statute that you can raise money from a small number of people and you can share the profits with them. So that makes it a security, sharing the profits. So investment of money in the common enterprise with an expectation of profit where someone else is doing all the work. So there's passive investors, there's a syndicator who's active, and the government has a vested interest, I think, in protecting those passive investors. So they write all these securities laws that are out there, and the purpose is to protect the investors.
But I think it's a lot more involved in the crowdfunding platform because I'm assuming I haven't used the crowdfunding platform yet. I'm assuming the platform owner is somehow keeping track of the investors and all the distributions.
Yes.
How does that work? Because as a syndicator, because you might get one check, right? Whatever is raised on that platform, and then you can distribute it accordingly to the platform. And then from there on, they can distribute to different investors.
It depends upon which platform you use. Sometimes the syndicator themselves will make the distribution, and sometimes the platform. So there's no real fixed rule on that.
So in that regard, I wanted to ask you this question because I have heard that these days you're allowed to raise capital for the same deal. If it's a 506C deal, you can raise the capital from the non-accredited investors and the accredited investors. You can do two classes, 506B and 506C. And once you're done raising with 506B, you close that, and then you can raise rest from your 506C investors.
That's
right?
exactly
That's
right. When we write our documents like that, we put in there that the syndicator, at their option, has a chance to stop the 506B part of the offering and go into a 506C. And it has to be in that order. Because if you're a 506C first and you're advertising and getting all these people, the SEC would be concerned that people you advertise for who aren't accredited will come in later. And so you can't do that. So you do 506B first. That's fine. And how we do it, when you start the offering, you send a form to the SEC. It's called a Form D as in dog, because we're operating under Regulation D. And so we send in the form and say, we're doing a 506B offering. Raise money until you're through with, the friends and family and the unaccredited investors and all that. Then you come to the attorney, and the attorney sends Form D to the SEC and says, we're closing that offering. And then I'll send another Form D to the SEC that says, but we're opening the 506C part of the offering. And then when that's over, I send another Form D. So there has to be a definite, identifiable audit proof change. And we do that with the Form Ds that go to the SEC. So that's fine. Now, there's mixed results in that. That is not the panacea. Because raising, to get someone to send you a check for $50,000 to invest in a deal, if they don't know you and you don't have a strong track record of doing deals like that, it's totally legal, but it's very tough marketing, We have mixed results of our clients who do that. Mixed results when they get into the 506C. But one of the reasons you do a 506C, Vinki, is to build your database. If you're doing a 506C and you're advertising like crazy, you're getting all sorts of new people that'll come into your database. And then you can create your substantive relationship with them. And then when you do the next 506B offering, you've got all these new people. So I'll have people that will be raising $5 million and they'll be at, $4.5 million, and they'll stop the B to open up the C just so they can advertise and get new people in their database. Not so much raising money, but expanding their database.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's a good way to do it, because even if it's a non-credited investor, they cannot invest, but they still wanted to understand the process. They wanted to understand how deal works.
Then you'll do the next deal, right?
Exactly.
Invest in the next deal, sure.
So let's bring the crowdfunding feature in this now. So we understand that in the 506C deals is for the accredited investors only. The question here is, can a 506B or a non-accredited investor invest in a 506C deal via crowdfunding platform?
The answer is maybe.
Mhm.
In 506C, you are restricted to only having accredited investors, period. So how would a crowdfunding offering where you can take non-accredited investors, how would that fit? Well, one of the definitions of an accredited investor is an entity with $5 million or more in assets. So you could do your crowdfunding, I guess. I haven't seen this happen, but you could do your crowdfunding. And if you raised $5 million and you had $5 million in the bank, then that entity would be accredited regardless of who the individuals are. And then that entity could invest in your 506C. But if you only had $4,900,000, then you have to look through the entity and look at each individual investor. And if there were any non-accredited investors in that entity could not invest in the 506C. I haven't seen that happen, to tell you the truth, Vinki. I haven't. I've seen going to B to C, that's fine, we do that. But a crowdfunding, the problem, once again, is finding a crowdfunding platform that will let you raise money for a real estate deal. They just aren't out there. So that's really, we might be hearing talk about that, but once again, and knock on wood, I do a lot of offerings and I've never seen that happen. But it could, because the olden days crowdfunding was only $1 million.
Yeah. And it was not.
So that didn't work. But at 5 million, I guess conceivably it could work.
Yeah, but the crowdfunding you're saying is mostly now for the accredited investors, or there could be crowd funds or customized for 50B investors as well.
Crowdfunding on itself doesn't really make a distinction between accredited and non-accredited. You can take anyone as long as the investment amount is less than 10% of their net worth or 10% of their income. And I guess collectively, you can only invest $100,000 a year in crowdfunding platforms. So they really don't have the same rigid structure that 506B says. As many accredited investors as you want, and 35 of this. 506C, only accredited investors. That isn't the structure of crowdfunding. And so, I mean, that's the answer. The only way you could do that if you wanted to is make sure you raised all $5 million.
Okay, so let's move on to a little bit different topic here. Like in the syndication business, it's all about private placements, right? So we do all these private placements via the private placement memorandum, we call it PPM. So for the investors, when they're signing the PPM, is a lengthy document, whether it's an offering agreement or a PPM. So what are some of the pointers that you can give us here? Or to be exact, me as an investor, what should I pay attention to when I'm signing these docs and making sure that I'm aware of most of the things that are listed, and it could be like not black and white, could be some gray area too.
I think you should be aware of everything that's in the document. So first of all, you should read the entire documents. The first document in something that's called a PPM is really the disclosure document. And it's the story. This is how much we're going to raise. This is what we're going to buy. Generally, these are the rules. And that's not really a contract or a legal document. It's the story. And so if I'm working with a client, that's the first document I prepare and I send it to you and we talk. Do I have the story right? Do I understand everything? And then I'll draft the operating agreement or the company agreement, which is the contract between the investors and the syndicators. And it tells you, how is this company going to be run? Because what you have is a limited liability company. How is the company going to be run? And then the third part of the PPM is the subscription agreement, where the investor says, I've read everything, I've asked all the questions I need, and I understand that this is risky, but I'm still going to invest. Here's my signature and here's my check. Fine. So what do you need to know? I think in the PPM, I think you just simply need to read the story. I think that so there's no confusion of what's going to happen. Because in our PPM I have 16 different segments. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but I think you need to read the story. The operating agreement is quite lengthy too. And I think the most important things in the operating agreement, because it can get into the weeds a little bit, how this company is going to be running. And you're probably, as a passive investor, not going to have anything to do with that. So I'd read about the manager, the syndicator. What authority do they have? Have they left any decision making to us, or have they kept all the decision making? And generally, the issue is, can they refinance, sell, or exchange without coming to us for a vote? That's what I'd be interested in. And I think that's okay. If they're an experienced syndicator, that's why you invest with them. So let them make the decisions. Then I think in mine, Article 4 is the cash distribution. You need to make sure you understand the rules by which they're going to distribute the cash that comes from the operation of the property. In my document, Article 5 is the fees that the manager is going to take. I do that. And then I think you should go, in my document, you go down to liquidity. Voluntary liquidity, hey, I need to sell. Involuntary liquidity, I've just gone bankrupt. We died, or whatever it is. Those, I think, are pretty important. So you need to know, is there a way out of this if I need my money? And if something catastrophic happens to me, how is this going to work? So I would look at those things, the manager's rights, the voting rights, the cash distribution, the fees, and the liquidity provisions. That's what I did. And a lot of the other stuff is it's really for the manager. So the manager knows what they can and can't do.
Interesting. So I'm going to ask you a couple capital raising questions, because I read in your bio, you raised capital for 10 years and a lot of capital as well. So dealing with that capital raising, did you ever raise capital from the foreign investors as well?
We raised money through the broker dealer, the licensed securities people. And if they had clients that were foreign investors, they had it all set up so that they could invest. They would have had a tax ID number, so they're a U.S. person, and they can invest. I get this question a lot. What's a foreign investor? Well, a foreign investor might be someone who's on a 2-year hiatus from their job at Ford in Detroit, and Detroit has sent them to London for 2 years. Are they a foreign investor just because they live over there? No, they're still filing their taxes here and they have a tax ID number. Or is it someone who lives in London and would like to invest here? That's problematic. There's, especially from different countries in the world, that's very problematic. But I would always say that if that real true foreigner opened either a corporation or an LLC here and got a tax ID number, they would be treated as a U.S. person, and we wouldn't have any problems with it. But we do offerings where every investor is really foreign. They have no nexus to the United States at all. And so we have to, there's something called Regulation S, as SAM, because we have to do that offering under the Regulation S rules, which really says, go ahead and do what you do, but tell us about it. Tell the SEC about it. Because if you're going to be fraudulent and you're going to steal money, people are going to come to the SEC and going to ask to go after you, and we need to know who you are. But our securities rules don't apply to foreign investors. But I think one of the things I've learned over the years that if you jump on a plane and go to Egypt and try to raise money from people who are truly Egyptians, you might find that the documents written in English aren't valid. Who knows? Who knows what the rules are over there? So you better get some legal advice before you run over there and violate their securities rules. So it's a challenge.
And it could be different for each country, right? It's
Yes,
not
and you're
one
not supposed to
specific
know
rule that
that.
applies to all.
Vinki, you wouldn't know what each country's laws are. So, but interestingly enough, the people who do that, who are my clients, do know what the laws are, and they have legal advice over there. And I work with those attorneys to make sure that what we're doing here, because we're still going to form an LLC in the United States so we can buy the property. We're just going to have foreign investors. And so, yes, you can do that. With help, I wouldn't do it without an attorney.
Yeah.
The analogy I have is if someone walks into your office with a paper bag full of cash and they say they're a foreign investor from another country, I wouldn't touch it. I would take them down to Chase or US Bank or something and say, here, this person wants to open an account. And then the bank knows what to do. The bank knows, well, we need an entity. You need a tax ID number. We need to look at the prohibited nation list. We need to look at the prohibited person list. And they can go through all that because they have staff and they understand that to see if that person can actually invest here, where you wouldn't have the capability of doing that. And then once they have the bank accepts the money and it's in ABC LLC, then ABC LLC can invest with you and you're on your way.
Interesting. And plus you do not have to deal with any tax implications either, because if it's a local LLC, that's it as a local investor.
Right.
And then rest they can do themselves.
Then they take that K1 and go wherever it is that they
Exactly.
like this now. Now, I'm not going to say that that's absolutely the rule, because there are some FERPA regulations that may apply where you might have to withhold 30% of all the distributions and pay the taxes. And if you don't pay the taxes or they don't pay the taxes, you might be liable. So a good CPA and a good banker will help you with all that.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much. I think we're out of time, but I wanted to ask you, is there something, that I did not know enough to ask you? Can you share that as well?
Well, I'm often asked mistakes that I see happening in the market, and I'm going to give you two mistakes that I see happening. Number one, in 506B, you can't advertise. 506C, you can. So here's one of the mistakes I see in the market. I go on Facebook, and here's a sponsor with about 20, 25 people standing around a monument sign in front of an apartment building. And they say, isn't this great? These are all the investors in this deal. And we're promising a preferred return, and we're promising 2x on our capital. And reach out to us if you'd like to be in our next deal. That's advertising. That will blow your exemption. And if you lose your exemption, the deal goes bad, you'll get sued for selling an unregistered security, which is a lot of problems. The SEC's concept there is all of those people in that picture know what you did. All of your investors know what's happening. If you put information out there to the public, the only reason you're putting it out there is to attract new investors.
Timing the market.
Yeah, and that's a bad deal. And so that's a mistake that I see in today with difficult financing. Financing is changing so much. I think you have to have more time. During the last couple of years, we could deal with the 60-day escrow. I think you have to have 90 days to start. I think if I were going to do a purchase and sale agreement, I would suggest I try to get 90 days or 60 with an extension if it has to do with financing. So those are the two things that I think are important today. And hire a good attorney and read your documents.
Great. I love that. So I'm going to ask you one more question here that came to my mind. So a lot of people, when they close a deal, right, they raise a capital, they close a deal, and they're posting on the social media. and they're cheering it up. Oh, congratulations, we closed a deal, and everybody's commenting. So you think it's legal to do that? And
No.
I know for the 506B deal, people shouldn't be doing that. For 506C deal too,
Sure.
they shouldn't be doing that.
If all you're doing is 506 deals, you can get a skywriter, you can get a balloon. Doesn't make any difference what you do, as long as it's not fraudulent, what you're saying.
Right.
Everything is the first 2 chapters of my book. I go through, misrepresentation and fraud and all this stuff that you see in the marketplace. But in 506B, once again, the theory is your investors know you closed the deal. If you're posting for the world to see that you closed the deal, you're fishing for new investors. That's advertising. So here's my legal advice. Don't do that. Okay. That's my best legal advice. Don't do that.
For 506B only, right? 506C,
Yeah,
you can advertise.
Right. So if you don't ever want to worry about a question, am I advertising? Am I doing anything wrong? Always do 506Cs. But getting people to send you money if they don't know you and you don't have a track record is difficult. That's a difficult marketing. Of the $2.2 trillion raised in private placements during the last 12 months that the SEC reported, 95% of the money is raised in 506B offerings. Most syndicators know their clients. The last thing I'll say, my most prolific client has done 164 offerings with me since 2014. All accredited investors, all 506B, because he knows all of them and they just check the box that they're accredited. And now he doesn't even take new investors in. So you can make a lot of money with 506B, and I'd kind of stay there until I got a good track record, some good experience.
Right. So thanks for all that knowledge. And this brings us to our rapid fire round. I'm going to ask you 5 questions. You can answer in 1 word or 1 sentence only.
Yes.
Ready? So first question is, what is one of the most important things that you have learned in life? And how did your life change after learning it?
Well, there are 2 things, okay? I learned patience through being a teacher, being a CCIM teacher for 40 years, standing on the podium and trying to get my message across, trying to teach people patience. And in law school, I learned that I wasn't always right. There might be, in fact, there's always 2 sides.
Right.
As the divorce attorneys say, there's 3 sides, his, hers, and the truth. So
that's true.
So those things just made me a better person.
That's good. So share with me 1 best book that you have read and recommend to my audience.
Oh, my best book. Okay, it has nothing to do with business, and I can't remember the name of the author right now, but the book is called The Shack. The Shack, SHACK. And it's kind of a religious book. It's a story about a man who lost his daughter in a terrible situation. And it takes you through his experience in kind of finding what the meaning of religion is. I'm not a terribly religious person, but I did lose a daughter to drugs many years ago. And this book came out about that time. And it helped me deal with the anguish that I had. So that's fine.
Right. In 1 word, what does life mean to you?
Experiences.
That's true. I like that. What is your biggest passion?
It's changed over time. Right now, my biggest passion at my age and my family situation is trying to spend more time with my wife. That hasn't always been my passion. My passion has been work. But we just celebrated our 50th anniversary. And
congratulations.
There's not going to be another 50 years. So how do I craft time? She's retired and is home, and I'm working virtually. So how do I craft time to be with her and yet give her space? She's tricky. I'll come in and I'll come downstairs in the office and say, is there something we should do? And she said, go away. I'm retired. You're not. I'm fine. So I had to learn how to deal with that. So that's my passion now, spending time with Kate.
That's nice. If you could turn back in time and talk to your younger self, what would you tell yourself and why?
I think I would work less and take that extra time and have a little more balanced life. I've never been a W-2 employee. I've always had to earn it myself, and I've enjoyed that. But now I enjoy being a mentor. So
great. So how can people reach out to you, Gene?
In one word, no. They can go to my website and schedule a free consultation, trowbridgelawgroup.com. They can call me, 951-570-1507, 951-570-1507. And those are the best ways to get a hold of me directly. And what I offer to people, if you come to my website, you'll get a chance to get a free PDF of my book. And then our YouTube channel, I think, is pretty stout with education and interviews of my clients who are in the business. And I think that's good. That's Trowbridge Law at YouTube. So thanks again for today, Vinki. I appreciate it. And good luck to you up in the Bay Area. And maybe we'll see each other someday, okay?
Of course. Thank you so much, Gene. I really enjoyed our show today.